My name is Lillian Marlowe, 32 years old. The dinner table wasn't about food tonight. It was a battlefield dressed in porcelain and candlelight. The roasted chicken sat untouched in the middle, skin glistening golden under the chandelier, its scent thick with garlic and rosemary, but no one lifted a fork. My father, Charles Henderson, leaned forward, his suit jacket still buttoned, as if he had come straight from the office to deliver a verdict. His hand slid across the table, not with affection, but with a crisp stack of papers. "Your sister will take 40% of your business," he declared, his voice sharp and deliberate, final like a judge slamming down a gavel. No arguments. My breath caught for a moment, though not from shock. I had expected this, his tone, his arrogance, his blind faith that I would obey. The only surprise was how brazenly he decided to do it in front of everyone. To my right, Elaine, my stepmother, folded her napkin with slow precision, lips curling into a smirk so faint it was almost polite. Almost. She thrived in moments like these, where Charles ruled and she could sit pretty at his side as the co-conspirator. Across the table, my half-sister Vanessa leaned back in her chair, the stem of her wineglass poised at her lips. She tapped the rim with a manicured nail, like a queen already celebrating victory. I set my fork down, the soft clink breaking the silence. My hands didn't tremble. My voice didn't crack. I placed my napkin on the table with deliberate calm, then reached for the black folder resting beside me. Its weight had been a quiet comfort all day, a reminder that tonight I wasn't walking in defenseless. I opened it slowly, letting the moment stretch, my movements measured and precise, like I had been waiting for this. "Page 7, I said firmly, sliding the folder across the polished oak. Charles frowned, confusion wrinkling the edges of his forehead. He picked up his fork, then froze mid-motion. The utensil slipped, clattering onto his porcelain plate, the sound ricocheting around the room louder than thunder. Elaine's smirk faltered. Vanessa's glass trembled, the wine rippling against the rim. Charles's eyes darted across the legal lines, his confidence draining with each sentence. His jaw slackened. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice cracking in a way I hadn't heard since childhood. "It's the part you thought I'd forget, Dad," I said, leaning forward, locking my eyes on his. But I didn't. 2 years ago, when your investment collapsed and I bailed you out, you signed over controlling rights. Page 7 is the transfer of authority. Elaine's hand froze midair, her grip tightening on her napkin. Vanessa blinked, disbelief flashing before anger replaced it. "You," Charles stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You tried to gut me," I cut in, my voice low, steel slicing through the air. "You thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd sit here, smile, and hand my life's work over to Vanessa. But I came prepared." Vanessa scoffed, rolling her eyes with exaggerated drama. "You're being ridiculous, Lillian. Dad's just trying to keep the family united. You wouldn't understand sacrifice." A laugh escaped my throat, sharp and bitter. "Sacrifice? While you were off burning through credit cards and bragging about fake promotions, I was building something from the ground up. 16-hour days, contracts no one believed I could land. And now you think you're entitled to it because Dad says so?" The chandelier above swayed slightly, though whether from the draft or the rising tension, I couldn't tell. Charles slammed his palm on the table, making glasses rattle and water spill across the embroidered cloth. "You will sign it," he barked. "That business exists because of this family. Vanessa has earned her share." I slammed my hand down harder, the echo vibrating through the wood. My eyes burned with fury. "No, Dad. That business exists because of me. And thanks to Page 7, it's mine. All of it." The silence that followed was suffocating. The authority in his face cracked, replaced by something more fragile. Fear. Elaine's jaw tightened. Vanessa's smugness collapsed into unease. For the first time, they saw me not as the daughter they could command, but as the storm that would rip their control apart. Vanessa snapped first. She slammed her wineglass down so hard the stem cracked, shards glittering against the tablecloth. "You think you're clever?" she spat, voice sharp and shrill. "All these legal games. You're pathetic. Without Dad, you'd have nothing. You've been living off his name since day one." Her words sliced, but I refused to bleed for her. I leaned back, calm on the surface, while my pulse roared in my ears. "You want to talk about names? Every opportunity you flaunt, every cent you've squandered, that was handed to you. I fought for mine. I built mine. You don't get to rewrite my story because you're jealous." Elaine's syrupy voice slid into the tension, smooth but poisoned. Girls, please, this is family. Don't tear each other apart. Lillian, you're letting pride blind you. Vanessa only wants what's fair. My head snapped toward her, fury tightening my voice. Fair? Fair would have been Dad showing up once, just once, to tell me he was proud. Fair would have been supporting me instead of waiting like vultures to pick me clean. Charles's face darkened, veins straining at his temple. Enough! You will not speak to your stepmother like that. You've always been ungrateful, Lillian. Without this family's name, you are nothing. I slammed my fist again, silverware trembling, glasses spilling. You're wrong, Dad. Without me, you're nothing. You wouldn't even have this house if I hadn't covered your debts 2 years ago. I carried this family while you played king. The words hung like smoke in the air. Vanessa's tongue froze. Elaine's perfect composure cracked. And Charles, my father, the man who always thundered from his throne, looked small for the first time in his life. His voice broke, quieter, pleading almost. Why would you do this, Lillian? We're family. I leaned forward, my own voice ice. Family doesn't ambush you with contracts designed to steal your life's work. Family doesn't turn your success into their retirement plan. You crossed the line, not me. Elaine gripped Charles's arm, whispering urgently, Charles, don't let her bait you. She's bluffing. That contract can't be airtight. I slid another document onto the table, the slap echoing like a gunshot. Already filed, court-stamped. Every loophole closed. Elaine's mask cracked, fury breaking through the polished facade. You conniving little... Say it, I warned, my voice quiet but deadly. Let him hear what you really think of me. Charles rubbed his temples, the weight of defeat pressing his shoulders down. His hands trembled. Vanessa's voice wavered, pale now. This isn't over. I leaned close, my stare unwavering. It already is. The room suffocated in silence, the balance of power shifting in an instant. Dinner was ruined. But I knew this was only the opening shot, because the Hendersons never surrendered. They plotted. And so did I. By morning, the chandelier tremor from last night felt like an omen that had decided to come true. My phone lit up before the sun had properly climbed the buildings outside my window, alerts stacking over one another, news push notifications, missed calls from unknown numbers that all smelled like microphones. I dressed in silence. The calm was a choice, not a feeling. While the kettle hissed, I stood at the window, watching the city blink itself awake. Down on the street, a flower vendor lifted a metal grate with both hands, the sound a rattling spine. Somewhere a truck backed up, chirping its warning, steady and indifferent. The world didn't care about the Hendersons, but the Hendersons had always insisted the world should. By the time I reached the office, the lobby hummed with the low murmur of whispers, heads tipping toward me and snapping back like rubber bands. Lauren intercepted me at the elevator, her tablet hugged to her chest like a life vest. Lillian, you need to see this. Her voice was tight, a string tuned too sharp. In the elevator, we watched the video together. My father and Elaine settled on the edge of our living room sofa, as if it were a witness stand. Vanessa perched beside them in an ivory sweater, hair smooth, eyes rehearsed. The cameras framed Charles in that saintly morning light PR people wait for, soft as absolution. My daughter has manipulated this family, he said, slow and sorrowful, like a pastor at a funeral. She prayed on us during a difficult time. Elaine dabbed nothing from the corner of her eye. We only asked for unity, she murmured. Families should share. Vanessa's voice sliced through the soft focus. She's trying to destroy us out of greed. The elevator doors opened. I didn't move. Lauren swallowed. They booked the morning shows and posted the clips everywhere. Headlines already picked a side. I handed the tablet back and walked into the hallway, each step setting a rhythm I could keep. Book the conference room at noon, I said. Call our PR. Invite everyone who wants a spectacle. Are you sure? Lauren asked, jogging to keep pace. They're still your family. I looked at her, at the worry making her smaller. They're the storm. I've already learned how to stand in the rain. The rest of the morning was a hive. Legal called, PR called, investors called and asked, in careful phrases, whether the ground under their feet was the same ground they'd stood on yesterday. I told them yes, and meant it. The truth doesn't become untrue because it's shouted at. At 11:42, I stepped into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my wrists until my pulse slowed. In the mirror, I saw my mother's cheekbones, my father's eyebrows, a line through the mouth that belonged to neither. I pressed a towel to my hands, then to my heart, as if that could iron out the ache. You still want him to be proud of you, a treacherous thought whispered. I dried my hands and left the towel on the counter like a flag I refused to carry. By noon, the lobby had transformed. Cameras, bright with hunger, clustered around the podium. PR had conjured out of nowhere. Boom mics hung like vultures. Someone in the back argued about white balance. The air stung with hairspray and ambition. I saw the red light on a camera blink alive and thought of the chandelier again, the faint sway that had signaled something coming loose. I stepped to the podium. The flash burst was a thunderclap. Good afternoon, I said, voice level. Since private matters have been dragged into public, I'll speak in public. I lifted the folder the same way I had last night, not as a weapon, but as a map. 2 years ago, I continued, when my father's investments collapsed, I used my own funds to stabilize our family obligations. In return, he signed a lawful, notarized agreement, transferring controlling rights to me. It wasn't a trick. It was a choice, his, documented and stamped. I held up the pages. Stamps winked like constellations caught in light. A ripple of scribbling. A hand shot up. Did you manipulate your father while he was vulnerable? I met the camera instead of the reporter. I did what any responsible business owner would do. I protected what I built. Vulnerability is not an excuse to rewrite contracts after the fact. Are you cutting your sister out? Someone else shouted. Entitlement is not inheritance, I said. Work is not communal property just because we share a last name. Another voice. Is this about revenge? I paused. Let the quiet shape the room. This is about stewardship, I said, and not allowing love to be used as leverage. I could feel Vanessa somewhere behind the cameras without needing to see her. The way rooms tilt when she's in them, the temperature shifting by a degree. I kept my hands on the edges of the podium, steady. I ended with 4 words. Page 7. It's binding. Flashes, calls, the metallic chorus of equipment being shifted on demand. When it was finally over, I walked back through the thicket of questions, a path opening by force and closing behind me like water. In my office, silence waited. It wasn't peace. It was the breath drawn between notes. Lauren slipped in and placed a glass of water on the desk. Her eyes searched my face for cracks. You were composed, she said. I was practiced, I answered. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It lit up a second time, then a third, as if persistence could change what I would hear. I turned the phone over, face down, like a sleeping animal. Outside the glass, the city glittered in afternoon sun. The world moved. Taxis honked. A bike messenger cut a clean line between buses. A couple argued and then laughed and then held hands at the crosswalk. Life kept being ordinary with cruel efficiency. The voicemail indicator blinked. I gave in. His voice came jagged, a blade wrapped in velvet. You humiliated me, Charles said. On television, in public. Is that what you wanted? To ruin your own father? I sat very still. He left no room for my answer, only his accusation. Another message, a minute later. Vanessa, breathing too close to the microphone, her anger running hot and unfiltered. You made me look like a parasite, she snapped. You finally got your perfect little narrative, didn't you? The self-made martyr versus the spoiled sister. I hope you're happy. Happy? The word landed like a pebble in my throat. I poured water and set the glass aside untouched. It wasn't thirst I felt. It was something that roared without sound. The ache of a girl who had once lined up report cards on the kitchen counter like gifts, waiting for a nod that never came. The ache of understanding, again and again, that love had conditions printed in a font too small to read until you were already failing them. By late afternoon, the headlines began to tilt. A business blog parsed the contract and called the transfer orthodox if unattractive. A finance podcast clipped my phrase, entitlement is not inheritance, and spun it with approving disbelief. An investor texted, proud to be with you. Another wrote, we stand. A third sent only a raised fist. Lauren hovered in the doorway, relief brightening her features. They're shifting, she said. You did it. No, I said softly. I pushed back. She hesitated. Do you want to go home? I can hold calls. Home. The word felt theoretical. No, I said. Set a meeting with legal for the morning and double our building security for the week. Do you think they'll... They don't surrender, I said. They strategize. She nodded and slipped away. The door clicked shut with a civility that felt like a lie. Dusk crept up the glass, the city bluing and then bruising and then lighting itself from within. I finally drank the water. It tasted like a compromise with my own body. The phone stayed flipped, the red light pulsing like a lighthouse I refused to sail toward. When I left the office, the air outside had that September bite that isn't cold but remembers how to be. My driver pulled up, and as I reached for the car door, I felt it, a prickle that was not wind. Across the street, a camera lens glinted. Not the press, something smaller, personal. A figure turned away just as I squared to face them, slipping into shadow with the ease of someone practiced at following without being seen. I waited 3 beats, 4, heart counting like a metronome. The figure didn't return. I climbed into the car and shut the door gently, as if volume could wake something waiting. "Home?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said, slowly. We rolled through streets that remembered me when I was a different woman. Nights I worked until the cleaners turned off the office lights and left me in a square of dark, so pure it felt honest. I had learned to make friends with late hours and coffee that tasted like consequence. Those nights had built a life that no one saw coming because no one bothered to look. At a red light, a billboard flashed an ad for a financial firm. A smiling father hoisted a laughing girl onto his shoulders. The copy read, "Building together." I laughed once, without humor. Together was a word we'd used like wallpaper, a way to cover cracks until the rain came through. When the car stopped at my building, I stepped out and looked up. My window glowed. Home waited like a question. In the lobby, the security guard lifted a hand, eyes wary but kind. "Long day, Ms. Marlowe?" "It's not over yet," I said. In the elevator, I watched the numbers climb. On the 5th floor, the doors opened, and a woman in a navy coat stepped in without looking, thumb flying over her screen, a small scar peeking from her wrist bone. When she caught my reflection, she flinched, then smiled too quickly. "I've seen you on the news," she said. "Good for you." "Maybe," I replied. The doors opened on my floor with a soft sigh. I stepped out and felt for a heartbeat, that tremor again, just the slightest sway, the promise of something unsteadied. On my welcome mat lay a cream envelope with no postage, my name written in a hand I almost recognized and wished I didn't. I lifted it, feeling the weight, the grit of sand caught in the paper seam. Inside, a single sheet. No greeting, no signature. 6 words, neat and merciless. "You forgot what else he signed." I looked down the hall without moving my feet. Doors slept in their frames. A bulb hummed somewhere overhead. I folded the paper along the center, then along it again, until it became a sharp little thing that could cut if I let it. The war had gone public, but something quieter and more dangerous was waking in the shadows where cameras don't reach. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The envelope lay on my kitchen counter all night, unopened, though its 6 words seared into my skull as if branded there. "You forgot what else he signed." I hadn't forgotten. Not really. I had just chosen to believe that one airtight contract was enough to secure me. But shadows always have second acts, and my father never played a single hand when he could hold a stacked deck. I barely slept. When the sun dragged itself up, I felt no warmth, only the sharp clarity of someone preparing for another ambush. By mid-morning, Lauren burst into my office without knocking, her face pale as printer paper. "It's live," she said, thrusting the tablet at me. On the screen, our family's living room again, but staged differently. Elaine had arranged herself in cream silk this time, her hair swept back as though grief had forced her into elegance. Charles wore a navy sweater, softer than last time, the kind of costume someone picks when they want to look vulnerable, not powerful. And Vanessa, oh Vanessa, she sat with her legs crossed neatly, a silver necklace catching the light, her voice rehearsed but quivering just enough to seem unrehearsed. "She betrayed us," she said, her eyes glassy, her throat tightening on command. "I thought we were sisters, but she used Dad when he was at his lowest." Elaine dabbed the corner of her eye again. "We only wanted unity," she repeated, words sweet as arsenic. Charles stared into the camera like it was a congregation. "We will pursue legal action. We will reclaim what was stolen." I set the tablet down, carefully, though my hand trembled. Their performance was flawless. Polished grief, curated betrayal. They'd taken the battlefield and turned it into a stage. Lauren's voice cracked. "What do we do?" I stood, pacing to the window, pressing my palm against the glass as if the city's hum could steady me. "We don't play defense," I said. "We finish this." At noon, cameras swarmed again. But this time I wasn't just holding one folder. I carried an entire file, thick with records, each page a spark begging to be struck. I approached the podium, heart pounding in rhythm with the click of camera shutters. "My family claims I manipulated them," I began, voice steady though my chest burned. "But let's speak plainly. 2 years ago, I didn't just secure controlling rights. I secured documentation of debts, of transactions, of signatures that tell the story they'd rather bury." I lifted a page, letting the numbers glare under the lights. Reckless investments, vanishing accounts, bailouts hidden under polished dinner parties. They want to call me a manipulator? Let's talk about manipulation. Let's talk about the lies that nearly bankrupted us all while they smiled for photographs. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward, scribbling furiously. Questions tumbled, but I pressed on, sharp, relentless. My father once taught me a lesson. Always come prepared. Today, I am. I set the file down on the podium with a slap that reverberated louder than any gavel. For a heartbeat, the silence was thick, almost holy. Then chaos. Questions hurled, flashes blinding, voices clashing like swords. But I had said enough. The truth had detonated. Hours later, alone in my office, the adrenaline ebbed into something heavier. Exhaustion laced with sorrow. The city outside glittered like a million indifferent stars, each light a reminder that my war was spectacle for others, but a wound for me. The phone rang again, I knew before answering. "Lillian." My father's voice was hollow, stripped of thunder. "You've destroyed me. Your own father." My throat tightened, but my voice did not waver. "No, Dad. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped cleaning up the pieces." He said nothing. The line went dead, a click sharp as a slammed door. I stared at the receiver, hand trembling now that the stage was gone. Alone, the weight came for me. The daughter who had once begged for approval, who had once believed family meant protection. The ache was unbearable, but I reminded myself of something truer than comfort. Storms don't fear thunder, they create it. And if they wanted fire, I was ready to burn. The fallout arrived faster than I imagined. By the end of the week, the headlines had turned, spinning like weather vanes catching a new wind. Charles Henderson, once paraded as a titan of investments, was exposed as reckless, a gambler with other people's futures. Elaine's crocodile tears became fodder for late-night jokes. Memes of her staged sobs circled online with captions cruel enough to pierce even her polished armor. Vanessa's endorsements, fashion deals, influencer partnerships began evaporating overnight. The world devours weakness when it smells blood, and they were bleeding from every side. Meanwhile, my office swelled with investors. Men and women who had once doubted me now shook my hand with a respect that felt both overdue and hollow. "You've proven yourself," one said, gripping my palm like it was gold. Another nodded, eyes sharp with calculation. "You're not just surviving, you're unbreakable." And yet, that word lodged itself in me. Unbreakable. I wanted it to be true. But when I stood alone in my office at night, city lights flashing like constellations against the glass, I could still feel the bruise of every betrayal pressing into me. 2 weeks later, I drove out to the estate. The once perfect lawn was overgrown, the hedges ragged as if mourning. Curtains that used to frame glowing windows now hung dark, lifeless. The house was no longer a fortress. It was a tomb, holding the echoes of every dinner table performance we had ever staged. I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching under my heels. For a moment, I simply stood there, letting the silence soak into me. This place had been my prison once. Every smile rehearsed, every word weighed. Now it was just another carcass of their collapse. As I turned to leave, the front door creaked open. Vanessa stepped out, shoulders drawn tight, eyes rimmed red. She looked smaller somehow, her beauty dimmed by exhaustion, her voice raw as it broke the air. "Was it worth it, Lillian?" she asked. "Destroying us?" The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. For a moment, I saw her not as the spoiled sister who had smirked across the table, but as the girl who once shared my room during thunderstorms, whispering secrets into the dark. A flicker of almost reconciliation tugged at me, threatening to soften the steel I'd worked so hard to forge. I swallowed. My chest tightened. Yes, I said finally, my voice steady, though my heart wasn't. Because you tried to destroy me first. She flinched, as if I had struck her. Her lips trembled, but no words came. The silence between us yawned wider than the driveway, wider than the years. I turned, climbed back into my car, and didn't look back. That night, I stood again in my office window, the city glittering below me. Lauren joined me quietly, her presence steady, her eyes searching mine. You did it, she said softly. They can't touch you now. I nodded, my throat tight, my chest heavy. I didn't just do it for me, I murmured. I did it to prove something. That no matter how hard they try to bury me, I'll rise higher. But as I looked at my reflection in the glass, I saw not triumph, but a woman haunted by what family should have been. The thrones I had toppled were crumbling, yes, but pieces of me had crumbled too. And in the quiet hum of the city, I realized something unsettling. Winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. The war was over, at least that's what everyone kept saying. Investors still poured through my doors, reporters still called, and my inbox filled with offers I would have killed for 3 years ago. Every handshake, every contract signed in those weeks carried the weight of validation. I had proven myself, not as Charles Henderson's daughter, not as Vanessa's rival, but as Lillian Marlowe, a woman who had clawed her way out of the shadows and into her own light. And yet, every night when the offices emptied and the city outside flickered alive, a strange stillness settled over me. It wasn't peace. Peace is soft. This was sharper, like a blade sheathed but never out of reach. I told myself it was vigilance. One evening, I lingered by the window longer than usual. The skyline glowed, glass towers lit like constellations, traffic below pulsing like veins. Lauren stepped in quietly, setting a mug of tea on the table beside me. You haven't taken a real breath since this started, she said gently. I let the steam curl against my face before answering. Breathing feels dangerous. Like if I pause too long, they'll find another way back in. She didn't argue. She just stood with me, both of us watching the city hum below, its rhythm steady in ways my family had never been. Later that night, I found myself listening to the voicemail I'd never erased. Vanessa's voice, trembling with rage. You ruined everything. I hate you. I'll never forgive you. The words were acid, but under them was something else, something I knew too well, the fear of being left behind. For a moment, guilt threatened to soften me. But then I remembered that contract slid across the dinner table, the smugness in her smile, Elaine's quiet smirk. I pressed delete. The silence after was heavier than her voice had ever been. 2 weeks later, I returned to the estate one last time, not to reconcile, there was no reconciliation left, but to see what remained of the empire that had once towered over me. The hedges had grown wilder, the windows darker. The driveway, once polished like a stage, was littered with fallen leaves. It was as if the house itself had given up pretending. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Some prisons you escape by never stepping through the doors again. As I turned back, I thought of my father, of his voice, once thunder, reduced to a broken whisper. I thought of Elaine's manicured hands clutching at authority that dissolved between her fingers. I thought of Vanessa, who had tried so hard to live in the reflection of our father's approval that she never built a light of her own. And then I thought of me. Back in my office that night, I stood at the window again, the city glittering like a million promises. For years, I had fought for scraps of recognition, for crumbs of love. Now I stood with everything they had tried to take, everything they had tried to bury. You did it, Lauren whispered again from the doorway, the same words she had spoken before. But this time I answered differently. No, I said softly, the reflection of the city burning in my eyes. I survived it. There's a difference. The war was over, and I had won. But as the city pulsed beneath me, alive and untamed, I knew something they never would. Winning doesn't end the story. It only begins another.